Thank you, everybody, for joining. Very grateful for making the time to join me, Daniel Fellows, the General Manager of Diversio UK and EU, alongside our founder and CEO of Diversio, Laura McGee. For those of you who may be meeting Diversio for the first time, Diversio is a people, culture, inclusion, analytics, and training platform. Companies use Diversio to make critical business decisions powered by our AI for the deepest understanding of any team, covering people, culture, and also delivering world-class training and educational programs. Launched in Canada in 2019 and now working in 51 countries globally. During our live and on-demand even webinar, Compliance and Workplace Safety under the Worker Protection Act 2023, we'll cover four main areas. An introduction to Diversio, analytics and people platform. What are the challenges for UK and EU companies facing today in terms of data collection, analytics, and optimizing their team's performance to drive inclusion and belonging? How does Diversio support companies to comply with the new Worker Protection Act 2023, which came to force at the end of October? And how does Diversio assist companies with their CFRD, ESRA reporting and help facilitate companies providing clients with access to training and educational programs? How are you today, Laura?
I'm very well. How are you?
Very, very good, thanks. I suppose a bit of an elephant in the room, Laura. Diversio isn't new to the UK, is it?
We are not. We've actually been in the UK for about 6 years. Quickly after we launched, we entered the market. We love working with British companies, and it really, delighted to have the honor.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I'm just going to switch screens. Bear with me. So, as I say, we've been through the agenda. Laura, tell us about Diversio.
Yeah, absolutely. So Diversio is a technology and people platform, and our mission, our goal is to help companies become more inclusive. And the way that we do that is through a number of different features and components to the tool, but at its heart, it's about measuring how people feel in the organization. Are they engaged? Do they feel safe? Do they feel included? Do they feel happy? Identifying what those specific problems are. So what parts of the workplace culture need improvement, need enhancement, and then really tactically supporting companies to make those improvements. And so all of it is tracked over time. The idea being that we see as companies make progress, it's encouragement and inspiration to make further progress and really create a welcoming environment.
Okay. People and culture analytics, risk assessments, anonymous reporting, and customized training. That really encapsulates everything that we do at Diversio. Would you add anything else?
No, I think that's right. The idea is it's a cycle, right? Culture it's not static. It's not, a moment in time, and there's always room to improve. And so the idea is if you bake measurement into the heart of what you do, that helps you to identify any risk in the organization, implement really tactical solutions, including trainings, and then again, keep the cycle going so that you're always improving.
Okay, wonderful. And obviously confidentiality and anonymous reporting is incredibly important to us. And as I said, we operate across 51 countries, across over 80 different languages as well. So we do have that level of global expertise and experience to help you navigate those waters, even if you're just the EU or UK, or potentially you're working for a global organization. So the meat of the sandwich, the legal and regulatory support for employees. It's effective from 26th of October 2024, the Worker Protection Act, amending the Equality Act of 2010, mandating UK employees to focus proactively to prevent workplace harassment with a focus on sexual harassment through preventative measures beyond complaint responses. So just so everyone is a level setting there. Do you want to talk through some of the compliance requirements, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a regulation we've been following for a while. And of course, we track international compliance. And so it's not out of step with what we're seeing other countries implement. But I would say it is a bit bolder. It is a bit more onerous than we're seeing in places like the US, like Canada, like Sweden, like Norway. And that's because it is a proactive duty. And so the idea is it's not just about, if you learn about a complaint or if you learn about an incident, you have to respond to it. The idea is that companies are now obligated to proactively prevent, prohibit, and mitigate the risk that such incidents will arise in the first place. And so, a lot of questions in the market. We've spoken with a lot of our law firm partners about what specifically does this mean. What the act lays out, what the regulation says specifically is you must take reasonable steps. And for anyone else who went to law school like I did, perennially ambiguous term. And so we'll go into what that means, reasonable means in a moment. Number two, to conduct regular risk assessments. So like any other, major risk to the business, it's all about continual tracking and periodic tracking. And so what is the cadence that should be? What form should that take? All good questions. And then finally, to implement measures. So that could take the form of a program, a policy, most commonly a training, but to, configure the workplace in a way that, again, will proactively prevent and mitigate the risk of harassment.
Yeah, the term configure the workplace, digging a bit deeper, that means it's not in isolation. It's not a one-off, is it?
No, that's right. I think, anything that involves people change, the group of people will change over time. And so what are the programs? What are the policies? What does the infrastructure of the workplace look like? And how, in every way, does that create a safe and respectful environment?
And it's quite challenging for companies, particularly speaking on behalf of the UK and EU. We have about a 35 to 40% churn rate of employees in organizations, which means it's a constantly iterative process, isn't it, to make sure that people are joining the company, they're going through this process as well, and they're being brought into the culture and to really understanding, what reasonable steps are.
Yeah, and I think that's a secret, right? And that's what we've heard from employees. That's what we've been trying to do for the past 7 years is how do you measure culture? It feels like it's amorphous. It feels like it's ambiguous. It's not a moment in time. It changes every time new people come into the organization. As you grow, it obviously, sometimes can get away from you. So how do you measure it? How do you keep track of it? That's something I think we've been pleased to see there is a way to do it. And you actually can put numbers and quantify what the culture of your organization looks like. And that helps you, to your point, identify what are the risks, what are the problems, and where is the culture maybe not what we hoped it would be, and how do we mitigate that?
Should we define culture, Laura, just in case there's some different interpretations with the folks in the webinar? How does Diversio define culture?
Yeah, so maybe I'll phrase it more in terms of how do we measure it. So culture it means different things to different people. I think most employees would say culture is the environment that they work in every day, and it's how they feel when they go to work in the morning. And for us, how we define it, we look at 5 key metrics that all contribute to a healthy workplace environment, and that's inclusive culture. So, what is the free flow of ideas, whose opinions are sought out, what is the healthy debate that's allowed to go on, number one. Number two is we look at fair management. So are people getting fair and unbiased feedback? Do they have, positive and constructive advice on how they can improve? Number three is basically access to networks. So is there someone that is invested in your career and will help you on that growth path? Number four is flexibility, workplace flexibility. And number five, very critical here, but it's all mutually reinforcing, is workplace safety. So is the workplace free from any sort of mental, physical, or sexual harassment?
A very wise person said to me quite recently that you would never run any other part of your business without data, without really understanding all the different data points of your business. So why or how, I suppose, would companies really genuinely or intentionally understand their people and their culture without having that data-driven insights to enable them to understand to those 5 KPIs you just mentioned, but then I suppose going a little bit deeper, looking at different cohorts within your business, maybe the dominant culture, maybe looking at race, ethnicities, around gender, sexual orientation, and age as well. So it's quite a deep process, but it's only one from what you just said that can truly be discovered and identified, and an action plan formulated from really having that data-driven approach. Would you agree?
Completely agree. And I think it all flows from the assumption that we believe is wrong, that culture cannot be measured. It absolutely can.
Okay, agreed. Good that we're aligned over that. So talking around alignment with EU reporting standards, I suppose at this point, without rather than reading out the slide, we were doing some research for this with Laura last week. There are incredible penalties and consequences, aren't there, for companies that don't actually adhere to this reporting in the event of potentially them being audited?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, like, look, again, in alignment with governments, certainly throughout Europe, um, stories of harassment keep coming out. And really egregious, kind of for many of us, unbelievable instances where people have abused their power, they've mistreated people, and it's quite gut-wrenching. And so what we've seen, really beginning in the late 2010s, is that governments are really taking this seriously. They're believing, and realizing that companies, unfortunately, are not internally motivated always to, create positive, safe, healthy workplaces. And so they've started to put teeth into the regulation. And so you'll see that in the new UK Worker Protection Act. You'll certainly see that through the EU implementation of ESRS, or CSRD is, the acronym soup we like to call it. But we're seeing, multi-million-dollar penalties come into place for companies that don't report and that they don't take steps. So it's a meaningful change.
And who in your experience are the key folks, key personnel within the business that should be driving this? Is this across HR, talent attraction, compliance? Is there normally one business owner within a company?
Yeah, look, I think that the government is sending a really strong signal. Given the size of the penalties, this has got to be something that's top down. It's actually board driven. These are metrics that we're seeing boards of directors are starting to ask for reports on. So have there been any penalties levied? What proactive steps are being taken? What is the data and the metrics that are being tracked to prevent the risk? And of course, that flows right down to the CEO. And so ultimately, the CEO does need to own culture. That is, I would argue, their most important job. But very tactically within the businesses, we're seeing it as a combination of, HR, compliance, legal, regulatory. But then ultimately, where I think we see best practice happen is department leaders or business unit leaders are the ones who are owning the culture of their team. So it really is, a holistic effort.
Yeah, and I suppose some of the key challenges that the folks on the call might be experiencing, these are challenges that we've experienced working with a huge amount of companies around this, but elements around data and privacy. The regulations make it super challenging for companies to collect and analyze data on employee sentiment, harassment, without breaching privacy, which then leads on to the quality, consistency, or probably actually quality and inconsistency or incomplete data and workforce demographics. I suppose very crudely, it's like exporting an Excel document and half the fields are empty. So actually, it really doesn't deliver the consistency and the quantity of data that you need. Resource constraints. Organizations, especially smaller ones, lack the tools and expertise to conduct advanced data analysis on inclusion and belonging. And then the data collection. The data collection is something that we're very fortunate to be global experts in, but it's often in multiple places. Maybe one IHRS, maybe another ATS, maybe another CRM. It's fragmented and incomplete. Do you want to talk about how Diversio supports companies, Laura, in collecting that data?
I do, but I do want to make one quick point before moving on. So the piece around data privacy and anonymity, we've learned the quality of the data and the data collection process is essential. And what we see typically is, like, quite frankly, especially when it comes to things like harassment, and particularly from someone senior to them who they don't know will be, fired or removed if they say something, like, people are not honest. And I think it's completely rational. And if they believe that their employer or their manager might have access to that data, they're just not going to tell you until it gets really bad, until you're at a moment of crisis, that they'll keep that to themselves. And so part of our reason, Detra, for being is to provide that firewall and really protect the anonymity of employees so that they can report without necessarily creating, legal liability for the employer just yet. And so give that safe space to anonymously report that something's wrong, raise a flag, give the company the opportunity to respond and look into it without kind of, triggering a huge crisis. And so what we've seen, an interesting trend that I thought I'd mention is, often when we go into work with companies, the first time we run a survey, We get a little bit of a response rate bump because we're a third party, we're independent, people know us, we've got a good reputation. We really, really do take anonymity seriously. We really will not give raw data, raw responses to employees ever. So we'll get a little bit of a bump, but what's incredible to see is that often by the second time the survey is run, they see that their data has been protected, they see that the company has taken actions. Those response rates go up to about 90%. And the people
Wow.
who prefer not to answer questions or they skip questions goes down to about 2%. And that's when you start to get really meaningful, kind of actionable input from employees as they feel like they have the safe space, they've trusted their employer with their insight, and they're willing to contribute to building a better culture.
So it's really around the anonymized collection of data, raw data that would come into Diversio. That data, if I'm right in saying, it's not tied to any employee numbers within a business, and that data is never then shared back in its raw sense to the actual company. Is that correct?
That's right. And the beauty of technology is we've configured the tools so that you get the most possible insight while protecting identity. And so, as you use the dashboard, as you try to investigate the insights, if you try to filter down to a level where someone might be clearly identified, we'll stop you. The boxes are gray, cannot display the data, that sort of thing. But we want to give you as much insight as possible so that you can take that action. And so to your question, Daniel, about at least how do we approach it? How do we collect the data needed to take that proactive step? We'll collect data from employees, again, anonymously, super short survey format, 4 minutes. So, quite easy to do. And then we generate a dashboard. And so it's an online tool that folks can log into, analyze their data, understand, how they benchmark, how they compare to peers, see if there is any department or level or region that might be at risk for harassment or another, related challenge. And then super tactically, we'll recommend for them. And then we can implement what is the program, what is the policy, what is the training aligned and targeted to that group that will help improve those scores. So it's quite easy to use.
Okay, incredible. And then just the last piece, just on here, the data collection. How do we enable people to do that when their data ultimately is potentially fragmented and not complete?
Yeah, I mean, so we've worked with companies in the past where we can ingest existing data. So say you have, an HR platform, maybe you have an engagement survey already. We can effectively input and then analyze the data ourselves. What's interesting though is we find, and we do that very commonly with enterprise companies, what we find commonly is that to your point about the Excel sheet with lots of empty fields, it's typically incomplete. And I think more importantly, we often run into about 30% response rates. So if the company has collected the data themselves, people just aren't filling out the surveys, they're not self-identifying. And so often it's easier, again, it's a 4-minute survey to do a net new data collection just so that you get the most robust data possible.
Okay, awesome. And also, we won't go too much into detail here because we will be here all day. The level of questions is quite a barometer for response rate, isn't it? In terms of the amount of questions.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We see, more is not better. And so, asking folks 100 questions is not going to better fulfill your duty to prevent harassment. What you really need are a couple. In our case, it's, I think, 6 that are the most predictive and the most reflective of the environment.
So how does Diversio glean such incredible demographic and workplace insights across the 5 KPIs that you've mentioned from such a small sort of potentially intake of sort of questions?
I mean, you're probably sick of hearing the acronym, but we use AI. And so
Okay.
we've used natural language processing. We've trained our own algorithms in-house, so they are themselves free from bias. And what the kind of the meat of the insight, what's really exciting for us is we ask, Likert scale questions. So on a 5-point scale, a few of them, but really the meat is we ask employees in their own words, tell us about your experience. And then what we're able to do is run algorithms against that data and generate really tactical, meaningful insights on what is it about the culture, what is it about the workplace that might be contributing to things like harassment, or on the flip side, do people really value and they really like about the culture? And again, because we're using a firewall and because we're using AI, you get the themes and the trends, but you don't need the specific feedback that might make someone feel compromised.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for going into depth. So, in summary, the Worker Protection Act 2023 mandates proactive, really key word here, proactive, not reactive measures to prevent workplace harassment by October 24. GDPR and data privacy remain key challenges for collecting and analysing employee sentiment and inclusion data. The EU compliance does align with CSRD and ESRS standards, really emphasising the social responsibility and employee welfare. And as Laura's brilliantly alluded to there, we're very fortunate that Diversio has built such incredible solutions, streamlining risk assessments, reporting, and tailored interventions for inclusive workplaces. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that summary, Laura?
No, I think, look, it's an opportunity. I'm always an optimist, but it's always nerve-wracking when a new law comes into place, especially one like this, which has, pretty meaningful penalties and also pretty meaningful obligations. So it's always a little bit, nerve-wracking, and also one more thing on your plate. I think this is an opportunity. Look, we've all seen it. We've all felt it. If you're in a healthy workplace culture, workplace environment, everybody feels better. Churn goes down, retention goes up, talent attraction improves. People are more productive. Sick days go down. And so I think it's an opportunity, like, look, take the preventive steps. You'll see the knock-on effects. You'll see the spillover effects in, innovation and in idea generation, in productivity. And so I think what better way to get buy-in from your CEO, for example, to implement a really great culture tool than this new legislation. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think it's hugely positive. Surely it has to be. I sit here from a point of privilege as a white male, heterosexual, no disabilities, and often I am not the potential worker within the workplace that might be experiencing the sex harassment. But as an ally, it's something for me that is hugely positive, which will ultimately make companies, boards, CEOs, all of us completely responsible to ensure we have an inclusive, fair, safe working environment for all.
Well said. Thanks, Dan.
Couple of questions. Thank you. What about the gig economy, where workers are often classified as independent contractors and may not be covered under traditional employment protections? Any specific recommendations are appreciated. So obviously, gig economy, we all know the gig economy, it's huge in the UK. Obviously, it is across North America as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I will say a number of our clients employ workers in an independent contractor relationship. And I think the idea is the law should not be the only reason that you want to create a healthy culture for your team. And so we do have a number of employers who go, our gig workers, just like any other workers, are valuable to us, and we want to make sure that they're productive and engaged. And so for all the reasons that are not legal, business performance, retention, as I mentioned, talent attraction, we need to make sure that they feel protected. So there are other incentives, I think, other than the law that could encourage companies to take the step. I certainly would. And on the flip side, there are some other legal, like sexual harassment writ large is prohibited in the United States or in the UK. So there are some other legal tools that could be used, even if they're not covered by the act.
Yeah, agreed. Next question. How do we mitigate smaller organizations who work as what you could term a close-knit team? How do companies guarantee a word I can never say, regardless of how many times I say, anonymity? I need to get some help with that. In reporting, while avoiding situations where the reporter may feel identifiable. Organization of 20 people, 2 offices. How do we mitigate that, Laura? Or how would you recommend companies mitigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I try, it's anonymity.
There we go.
So I think we find the secret sauce with a survey. I mean, you can always get good data no matter what if you do a survey, but we find about 40 people, you really get those benefits of anonymity from an analytics perspective. Before that, I think it's so good to run a survey. People may not feel honest and candid. So in that case, I would say take the proactive step. Do the training, implement the anti-harassment policy, implement the recourse policy, you know, run especially leaders and managers through a program, an inclusive leadership program. So take the steps. Don't wait for the feedback in that case because you may not get high quality data.
Yeah, so take the reverse proactive approach.
Exactly.
And we've got another question. In sectors like finance or law, where hierarchy and power dynamics can be entrenched, as an employer, how can you balance protecting those employee? How can you balance protecting themselves legally with addressing harassment claims from junior employees? So a bit of a hierarchical structure within a business. How can the company protect itself, but then also balance any sort of harassment claims from junior employees?
Really great question. I personally, I am a lawyer, so I grew up in that environment. I know what it feels like. That really is the reason for our firewall. Is we see the reality, which is in most countries, there's a proactive duty. If somebody reports harassment, you must investigate it, and that can be really cumbersome, and that can be really challenging. And so unfortunately, a lot of companies are reluctant to do that. They're reluctant to put themselves at risk of a potential claim that could, disrupt the workplace. I think most folks don't agree with that, but that's what happens. And so at Diversio, what we do is because we have that third layer, and we'll never tell you what specific employee complained or what specific person is being complained about. We give the company the red flag, we give them the signal without triggering the obligation to start that entire huge investigation. And so with law firms and finance firms, for example, we'll tell them, look, something's really wrong. But here's like steps that you can take to do it without turning over the organization.
Cool. Amazing. Laura, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you for those folks that have joined us live. And for those of you who are going to watch this in your own time on the webinar, you can reach me in London via LinkedIn or Daniel Fellows at diversio.com. If you'd like to learn more, if you've got any follow-up questions. Our next Diversio UK webinar will be on 3rd of December. We might have a Christmas trip by then with Sam Bonin, the product manager at Diversio, where we're hugely excited to share a live demo of the platform, which Laura's spoken about today, but also introduce Lumi. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything about Lumi, but believe me, you want to see how Lumi can help everybody hire inclusively. We'll send out the link for the next webinar afterwards and also today's presentation. Thank you to Kate and our Priya from our incredible central marketing team for making this all possible. And we wish you all a very, very sunny, well, in London anyway, very sunny and cold Thursday afternoon. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thanks now. Take care.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.